But that's the entire reason why there's disinformation. That's the entire reason, why news, whether it's like mainstream or whether it's like, some crazy website or some YouTube channel or something like that, is doing its job, for the corporate oligarchy for all intents and purposes, because basically they're making it so that nobody trusts anything. Nobody knows where to look. Nobody has any trust in any of the information organs that are out there. And so you can basically get away with anything, because if somebody happens to, almost by accident, start calling out like actual truths out in the universe, at this point, all you have to do is point and say, oh, that's fake news. And half the people are going to go, oh, yeah, that probably is just fake news. So forget about it. We are lost as a people as far as like our ability to discern good information.
Sean Dustin spent time in federal and state prison for drug trafficking and fraud. Upon release in 2006, he had nothing but the clothes on his back, a bag of mail, and legal paperwork. In 2010, he kicked a long-time methamphetamine habit and started the long climb back up the ladder of life. This is the Nowhere to Go But Up podcast. If you want transparency and authenticity, you're in the right place. This is the Nowhere to Go But Up podcast, and this is Sean Dustin.
What's up, everybody? Thanks for stopping by the show. This is your first time listening, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. It's good to have you with us. I got a couple plugs before we get started. Please join us for the very first IndiePod United Virtual Summit. Here you will observe and learn from other podcasters how to take what you can't stop thinking about and turn it into something real. The online event for new and veteran podcasters where we come together to create with one another. The IndiePod United Convention happens on November 29th through December 3rd, 2020, featuring amazing shows, speakers, breakout sessions, entertainment, games, and plenty more, as we dive in to learn more about the fascinating world of podcasting. For more event information, please visit the Facebook group IndiePod United. Tickets are available through Eventbrite. The IndiePod United Virtual Summit. Together we listen. Relevant links are available in the show notes. The Con, 5-part series true crime documentary about the 2008 financial crisis. Everything that we didn't learn about it from the beginning. This is available at thecon.tv. There you can get the first episode for free, and the rest of the episodes are available on video on demand. Today I'm going to be talking to Eric Vaughn and Cindy Castro DiRusso. Eric was one of the producers of The Con. I had recently interviewed, I think in episode 55, Patrick Lovell. He was another one of the producers of The Con. I did a co-hosted interview there with the Ripple Effect podcast and Ricky Varandas. I wanted to talk a little bit more about The Con and release this episode before the elections. Kind of, because it's really relevant to what we're kind of dealing with right now. So, Eric had a great discussion with him. Cindy shares about her story and how she was personally affected by the 2008 financial crisis when she lost her home. And Patrick did too. Patrick, that's the reason why he got involved as well, is that he lost his home too. So it was a great interview. I hope you enjoy it. Let's get to the show. This is the Nowhere to Go But Up podcast, and I am your host, Sean Dustin. Tonight, or this evening, I should say, we have two very special guests. One is Eric Vaughn, who is an award-winning commercial director producer with extensive experience in leading-edge production from narrative films to VR immersive experiences. Eric has recently completed his long-form documentary series directorial debut, The Con, which is how I came to know who Eric was. And then we also have Cindy Castro DiRusso, who is a producer and casting director and has worked on shows in Hollywood such as the Jimmy Kimmel Show, The Voice. I just watched that last night. Gordon Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares and other reality TV shows on Fox and Nat Geo. How are you guys doing tonight or this evening?
Yeah, we're doing great.
Doing good. Thank you.
No, thank you for coming on the show. And it's kind of like a follow-up to the interview I did with Patrick previously with Ricky Verandis on the Ripple Effect. And yeah, I literally watched that movie, 18 hours of it. I watched it 3 times. I had the three viewings that I got for the screening. I watched all 3 of them because I was looking for inconsistencies in it. And it was like, I couldn't find anything. And I was like, damn. I mean, have you ever watched something, and I'm sure you have, Eric, you've watched a documentary where it's just like slapped you in the face, kicked you in the ass, and turned you in the direction, and you just start marching?
Yeah. I mean, it's there's been a few times when that's happened. I'm really, that's awesome that you feel that happened with you with our program.
Yeah.
Put in years and years and years of work to try to make it as tight as possible because, I mean, ultimately, Patrick, Adam and I, when we were first putting this thing together, we knew we had to get it right. We absolutely knew that we had to get it right. And part of that was getting as much of it done in the epicenter, from my perspective, of the crisis, which was the poor neighborhoods in the industrial Midwest. And, and that's why we did so much of our producing, here in like Akron and Youngstown. And, and that's how Cindy got involved.
Yes.
Yeah. And Cindy, your backstory is that you like Patrick experienced it firsthand, right?
Yeah. I was living in Phoenix in 2007, 2008 when things started to go really weird. Credit lines started getting cut, business lines started getting cut. No one had answers. The bank wouldn't give you an answer. And then I had a recruiting business for legal professionals back then. And all of the budgets froze. I've been in law all my life, so I've never seen a law firm not hire. And luckily, I had very close relationships with my clients. And they said, look, we're not going to be hiring for about 3 years. And we don't know how you're going to survive. And then that was before everything went public. So that was like the end of 2007, like fourth quarter 2007. And then by first quarter 2008, everything had gone public and the markets were crashing and you know what happened. So, and I was pretty well diversified. I thought I was well diversified in legal professional recruiting, and real estate investments out there, and both came collapsing down at the same time. So it wasn't a good time in my life, that's for sure.
And so how did you two meet up and put all of this together and all of the pieces? Because I mean, this documentary just really put it in layman's terms where you could understand the mechanisms by which it was all happening. A lot of times, like The Big Short, they didn't tell you that. They gave you a piece of what happened, but they kind of just sort of brushed over the how it happened, in my opinion.
Right.
And I think that there was another one that was out there as well. I can't remember what the name of it is, but I heard it was sort of like the same thing. And I'm sorry, man. I think that they do that on purpose. The players and everything else that are involved, because it's all part of the octopus, man. There's an octopus, global octopus, and the media is that they own, and they own all of it, damn near. It's one of the legs. And it's when something, and all of these people, these families, this is my opinion. This isn't fact. This is just my conspiracy ramblings that I've, heard, whatever. But it makes sense to me, that they have the money, the people that have all the money and own everything. They can kind of move markets and do all these other things. And then they use the media to kind of like, whoosh, all right, we need everybody to go that way and follow that line and follow that narrative. And it's crazy. And I really believe that we need to, as people, independent media sources like myself and other like-minded podcasts and other media, we need to be fighting back against that narrative and against the media with our own media.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
I think it was Matt Taibbi coined the term vampire squid when describing Goldman Sachs, but I think that vampire squid can speak towards any of the supermarket, big Wall Street banks that exist out there. I mean, I think that is the same thing that you're talking about. I mean, they have their hands and arms in so many things, and it's not just the banks, right? It's like, the shadow sector has now kind of overcome even Wall Street. I mean, you think of like BlackRock, and how powerful they are. I mean, they're moving the markets as much as anybody. I mean, they administered Maiden Lane for Christ's sake. I mean, that's real power right there. But to get to sort of like how Cindy and I found each other to work on our project at Con. It actually goes back several years ago when Patrick and I were kind of conceiving about how we wanted to approach telling the story, because it was always super important to all three of us, the initial people who were putting this together, Adam Bronfman, Patrick Lovell, and myself, that we tell a story that was going to be able to speak to, the regular people, and to tell it from that perspective. Right. And so at the time, I remember that summer, I was sitting back and watching TV, and the Jinx came on. And the Jinx was that documentary about Robert Durst that HBO did, where the guy basically, for all intents and purposes, admitted that he killed his wife, on screen and stuff like that. It was like, but it's really a fascinating documentary in that, it was one of the first like multi-episode documentaries that I saw, and it was a true crime documentary, and they went into scene because they couldn't film what was actually happening, because a lot of these things happened in closed doors and in different time frames and so on and so forth. And that really stuck in my head, because ultimately what that instructed me was that the approach to do this is not to do the con as like a economic, highly esoteric, throwing out big words all the time and, trying to sound smart type of documentary. If this was going to be effective, it needed to be something that people like myself basically could wrap our heads around. And so that's why we, really sort of turned towards the true crime, documentary as like a template. And when that became apparent, it also became apparent that we had to do some really good, high quality recreates in order to, flesh out the story and be able to give the audience, some sort of, emotional space to be able to take in and understand Addie Pope's story, or how the Summit County Task Force, how that big bust went down when they busted David Willen's office, or what was happening in the back, in the back rooms at the Department of Justice, or at the SEC. And so, because obviously we didn't have footage of any of those things, we decided that, okay, this is the opportunity to go into, recreate and to really kind of produce something very nice and polished and what have you. And that's when ultimately looking for somebody to help produce those recreates is when we found, I think it was initially another producer, a friend of ours, Melanie, and then Cindy. And then Cindy was like really instrumental in casting so many of these people that we used, and that was so critically important, especially like the Addie Polk character. Mm-hmm. I mean, we needed somebody who you, as an audience, would be able to sit back and feel the pain of what she was going through, you know, in those moments before she attempted to take her own life. And that's exactly the skill set that Cindy brought, and she really did a great job, you know, understanding the story to such a degree that she was able to cast it really well to help tell that story, because, you know, it was really important that we nailed that.
Yeah, Addie Polk was my grandmother. And I think that's what you were trying to capture there, is that this is everybody's grandmother. This is everybody's story. You know what I mean? Because you're just one bad situation removed from having that happen to you, you know, and it's very possible. I mean, look at where we're at right now. I mean, I honestly, when I stop and think about it, and I thought about it the other day, I was like, you know, this really seems like 2008 seemed like a test run. In my opinion, it was a test run, because I had friends that fortunately, you know what I mean? So many people lost their homes at such, like, all at once, that there were still people besides the banks that could get some good deals. Like, I had a couple of friends that bought 2 houses, you know, for $500,000, and they made a bunch of money when they sold them a couple of years ago. This time, they made sure nobody was going to have no money to buy anything. Right. I mean, am I crazy by thinking that? I mean,
you know,
oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Cindy, please.
I was going to say, ironically, a lot of people don't know this about me, is that I come from the financial regulation world. I was a white collar criminal defense paralegal for a very long time. And before that, I was on the regulatory side. So I worked for FINRA, which is now used to be NASDR regulation, who was a parallel to the SEC. So I actually worked in the Office of General Counsel in the late 90s during the tech bubble. So I've seen every kind of Ponzi scheme, every type of financial backdoor scheme. I've pinned the bad brokers. I've defended, not proudly, of some huge Wall Street banks in my day. So I kind of went from the good cop to bad cop, and now back to good cop, I think. But in 2008, Patrick and I have actually talked about this a lot. We feel like we were kind of no man's land at the time. We didn't know a lot of people like us that were going through such a financial hardship. Like we were, some people still held their jobs and what have you. And so they were able to float by. Entrepreneurs like me didn't get to float by that well, and Patrick as well. So this time it's on a much grander scale. They're just robbing us in front of everyone. So that's kind of how I feel about the whole situation. And there's not even any remorse. It's just happening right before our eyes. So
I think that's probably the biggest difference, is that they just become more and more blatant. It's like now they don't even try to hide it. They're just saying, oh, you have that? Here, let me just take that from you. And you can do something about it? Didn't think so. I mean, that's basically the only difference between now and then. Patrick and I were actually having this discussion just a little bit earlier today. We were talking about, you know, like the question came up, you know, what is it that certain people who support, President Trump, you know, really, really see in him? And I said to him, well, you have to remember that despite the fact that it was primarily W. Bush who was like the guy in charge, and his administration was in charge throughout most of these fraud epidemics and fraud schemes that were going on, that they were the people who had the power to actually stop it before it became a problem. despite all that, it wasn't until the Obama administration that it actually became a problem for most people. So I think most people associate their issues with the Obama administration and kind of give W. Bush a pass. Mm-hmm. Now, the reason why the Obama administration ends up making the Dems look as awful as they actually are, I should say, is that he didn't do anything. He had a golden opportunity to actually prosecute so many of these white-collar criminals at the time. He had the opportunity to help make regular Americans whole at the time. And he simply did not do that. And I think that so many people lived through that, saw the complete ineffectiveness of the Obama administration, through that period of time. And basically when 2016 rolled around, they were just like, well, I'm certainly not going to be, voting for the same people that basically, let the robbers get away with everything. So I'll go with anything at this point. And so they went to Trump, hoping for the best. Whether that was go ahead, Cindy.
And the taxes. I mean, Obama he regulated the middle class to death. In terms of construction, heavy highway, SBA were doing the most audits that they ever did at the time, all on small businesses instead of going after the larger companies, Wall Street, etc. Like Eric was just explaining, he came after the middle class, and my friends were so pissed that I didn't vote for him, and they were so mad at me. Some of them didn't even talk to me. I'm like, you guys don't understand what's really going on. And so anyway, but he didn't really. So everybody thinks, cause we're in Hollywood and we make documentaries and we're filmmakers, that we're left, we're big time left radicals, or we're not, so, which is funny. But
well, not Dems anyway.
We're not Dems. Yeah. We're not Dems.
Well, it's just one of those crazy, crazy things. I mean, it feels like our reality has been inverted.
Yeah.
Everything that you see isn't what it is, even from how money. Like I was saying this for the longest time until I met Jeff Ginter and Steve Grumbine about taxpayer money. It's fun, rah, 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 and screaming at the top of my lungs. And then he explained to me that, well, it doesn't really work that way. I mean, I guess you could still keep screaming that if you want, but it's not how it works. So maybe
right.
And so I was like, all right, well, maybe I should. Can you explain how it works then? And he did, and it was, and I no longer say that now. I don't.
Right.
Well, that's the sticking point right now in today's headline, or yesterday's headline, where Biden's going to tax 62% in California for incomes above 400,000. It's like they're always sticking it to the middle class, and I know 400,000 is the middle class, but like they appeal their narrative, the headlines, to the middle class and lower class income, because they don't understand, they don't understand. And I don't like to sound condescending, but they don't understand the full picture. Like, he should be saying, I'm going to tax this range. Do you remember when Bush, reclassified, during TARP, like small businesses were $3 million, or do you remember that, Eric, when he reclassified the small business? No,
I don't recall
here.
That
yeah. So it was crazy. He reclassified what small business was, and small business was $3 million in revenue. So, this was all this is when all the things were going down in the 2008 financial crisis. So,
right.
People could get loans because you're a small business. Kind of happened this year, it seems like this year with PPP, right? All these small businesses were getting PPP loans. So that's why they were getting them.
Right. But I think that what you were saying just a second ago, Sean, is really interesting because as we're sort of seeing, how the Fed has been acting, throughout this COVID, economy, I think that it becomes very clear that, you're alluding to MMT, right?
Yeah.
It becomes very clear that there is, that there is a spigot of money. That money can just be brought into existence to pay for things. It's just that they are completely committed to running it through Wall Street and then having it potentially, hit the rest of the economy through loans rather than just getting it directly into the economy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I think that that's the big sticking point is that these corporations, these giant banks and what have you, they understand MMT. They have for decades.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been making themselves extraordinarily rich, because of that understanding. And then basically, telling us that everything's like tax-based, for everyone else, and I think that that's, one of the big conceits that's allowing things to happen right now is that, we feel that everything has to be done through Wall Street, through the banking system. And the banking system is basically laundering fraudulent activity at this point. And I think that when I say that, I'm not saying that colloquially. I mean, the FinCEN files, show without a doubt that, that our entire worldwide economic system is basically a money laundering system for fraudulent behavior anywhere in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And the people who end up getting hurt most by that are the people is basically everybody who doesn't have their hand on the levers of power. And that's just absolutely ridiculous. And if there's anything that we try to do with the cons, that we try to show, at least open a window as to how the mechanics of that actually works. Because my feeling is that if people can have at least some sort of basic understanding as to how they and everybody else in the economy is getting completely screwed, then there's like some potential for the power to actually do something about it, to find the political will to do something different than what we've been doing. I mean, I think it's become abundantly clear at this point that neither party is really opposed to each other on economic matters. It's just a matter of whose face is deepest in the trough. And that's not a healthy political system.
No.
I mean, we were talking.
We've become too big to fail. Yeah, we have become too big to fail. So we'll see what happens.
Clarify that statement. As in the United States, or just like I didn't follow that statement.
Well, it just piggybacks off the documentary Too Big to Fail.
Yeah.
All the major players in the banking system all have each other's, back.
Yeah.
All the politicians are greased by the important people with all the money. All the lobbyists run everything. So, they're not going to make the same mistake that they don't think they're making the same mistake, but in 2007, it cut off a lot of it caught people by surprise. Even people internally didn't. But now it's just like everybody's in it. Everybody's in the game. And they're not going to allow, like, for instance, inflation hasn't happened. They're doing everything they can to make borrowing money right now is super cheap, like it was in 2005 and 2006. You can buy a house for 3.5% right now, 3.75%. It's the same thing all over again, but now since there's so many gerrymandering in all the districts for politicians, super PACs come in and it's just all convoluted. It's all like reciprocal flow of one another. It's just, that's what I'm saying. It's just gotten too big to fail. It's gotten too corrupt. And as long as people have jobs and make money and can buy their house and spend, and live beyond their means, I think people are kosher, but they don't really see that there's this huge bubble that's happening. And it's unfortunate that a lot of people aren't as financially literate, or maybe they don't want to know. I think that's
kind of blaming the consumer, a little too much, when basically if you look at productivity as opposed to the amount of money that people are making, it's like productivity continues to go through the roof, and what people are taking home has remained flat for decades.
Like California.
Yeah.
I mean, the entire country, right? And so that tells you that people are working more efficiently, they're working better, they're doing everything that they should, but they're not being rewarded with any money. It's like people would be living within their means if they were being paid what they were worth.
True.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is true.
That's a very good point, Eric. Because I do live in California and I work in the, I was up until, the 19th when we had the shutdown, union construction. And so like, I'm a part of a union, and like, I read the thing and they're pushing Biden, and it's like, the whole union thing to me, it just really, it put a bad taste in my mouth when I ran for a position as a business agent, and I was very involved in like executive board, trustee and all that other stuff. I went through the ranks to try to get into one of those positions, and it was a micro telescopic look into what our national system is kind of like, right? All of the nastiness comes out that does in elections. You've got just people just bad mouthing you and all this other stuff. And it's like, I just didn't like it, man. I didn't like it. It was like, I think merit is, and I think, so I would be considered like Hillary, right? She had all the credentials, all of the merits and everything else. She did everything, did all the T's, I's and everything else, that crossed them and dotted them. That was me. But merit doesn't mean anything in an election type thing. It's about popularity and, being able to convince people that you can do stuff that you really can't. Like lowering dues. Dues are like taxes. Once you get them, you ain't getting them back. Sorry. But it goes to the point of the United States and our population. Within our local itself, there's a whole bunch of people, voting block, that has no idea how the local even works. They don't know the rules. They don't know the bylaws. They don't know that you can't just, lower dues. You can't just change the pension. All of that stuff. I mean, it just doesn't work that way. And we're going through the same thing now in our own electoral system, and people just don't understand how things work. We're uninformed. We don't know. We were never taught. We're too lazy to go look. And even when we do look, we're afraid because, what is it that we're looking at? There's so much misinformation, disinformation, that you have to be an investigative journalist or somebody like yourself, Eric, that can, knows where to look and how to find the stuff. The average everyday person, they're just like, shit, man, what? I'm just going to shut it off and walk away.
Well, that's the whole problem. When the truth is obscured from you, how can you make good decisions? You can't. Mm-mm. But that's the entire reason why there's disinformation. That's the entire reason, why news, whether it's like mainstream or whether it's like, some crazy website or some YouTube channel or something like that, is doing its job, for the corporate oligarchy for all intents and purposes, because basically they're making it so that nobody trusts anything. Nobody knows where to look. Nobody has any trust in any of the information organs that are out there. And so you can basically get away with anything, because if somebody happens to, almost by accident, start calling out like actual truths out in the universe, at this point, all you have to do is point and say, oh, that's fake news. And half the people are going to go, oh yeah, that probably is just fake news. So forget about it. We are lost as a people as far as like our ability to discern good information. And I think that is the that is like one of the biggest tricks that they've pulled. They being, the powers that be. Once again, it's like, the same people who own who pay all the, the same people who own all the lobbying firms are also the same people who own all the media outlets. Mm-hmm. So there's going to be a consistent message being brought out there. There's going to be a consistent campaign. I mean, I've been involved in advertising. I know exactly how campaigns work. It's consolidated. They know what they're doing. And yeah, keeping us completely off balance makes it so that we can't make good decisions. And if we can't make good decisions, then everything that we do is going to be emotional. Right. And so then you don't really have to have like any actual policy or platform or anything like that. You just have to like strike the right emotions with the right amount of people, and voila, you're president.
Yep. That's very true. And this is a good point to segue into another part of this discussion. I don't know. And that's about where the movie is now. It released on September. You've got like 500,000 views, I believe, on it, or 250. Patrick told me a number the other day. I can't remember. I didn't write it down. But I mean, for a movie of that's that compelling. I mean, right now we're in the midst of, a bunch of people getting, like people that I talk to in alternative media have gotten, they're getting shadow banned from social media. They're getting accounts deleted. They're getting their Patreon accounts deleted and the money taken out of it that patrons actually gave them and not returning it. Wow. All of this stuff is happening, in social media right now between YouTube, Google, not Facebook hasn't, they started doing the QAnon stuff, like anything that has to do with QAnon, they're deleting all of that, which, I mean, they're private entities, right? You're allowed to censor if you want, but I mean, it's like, come on. I mean, really? So where are you guys on that? Because a lot of the Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, all of those major players that, have a lot of reach are kind of like closing the door on you, right? So to speak.
It's this musical algorithm game, right? I mean, it's like whatever the entry points that you need in order to like hit the algorithms that they use in order to find audience is basically the game that they're playing. And they can either use that as an excuse to bring something in, or they can use it as an excuse to not show something at all. And, and I can't say, what's happening, with decision makers that have seen our materials or whatever the case might be. What I do know is that we've been reviewed by some of the top, media reviewers out there, and we are almost universally given like fantastic, phenomenal reviews. And so it certainly isn't the quality of the product. It absolutely isn't isn't that we have poor quality information. I mean, our information is as vetted and as documented as anything that you'll ever see. And I'll stand behind that statement any day of the week. So it's something else. Maybe it's something as simple as the fact that we don't have, Matt Damon narrating or Opie, Ron Howard, as our executive producer. It could be that simple, but who really knows? But the fact of the matter is that whatever the system is in place that's out there, it makes it very difficult for new entities entering into the market to compete with established entities, which to me is all these people like try to make arguments about, capitalism and free market and all this other stuff. Well, where's the free market in that? Where's the free market in the fact that only so many different media outlets have the ability to reach millions of people? And where's the free market when net neutrality is basically dictating who has the bandwidth to see what? I mean, people keep forgetting that net neutrality was shot down, that we're basically in a post-net neutrality universe, aren't we? I mean, so that means that the spigot is open, for some outlets and it's completely closed for others. And I think that people tend to forget that when we start thinking about, trying to get like alternative voices out there. It's like people needed to think about it back then when we were trying to fight for it. Right. But isn't that always the case? Mm-hmm. Right. That we always like lament the thing that we lost rather than fight for it while we still have it. And, and that's just human nature, whatever the case might be, but that's kind of where we are. I mean, we know at this point that all we can do is continue to build our audience, and that's what we're doing.
So, yeah, I mean, it definitely is crazy. And I didn't mean to put you on the spot, and any kind of conspiracy theories that get thrown out in this podcast are definitely my own. My own thoughts and my own opinions when it comes to that. Nothing from Cindy or Eric. That's just how my mind works. And, and I know that some things are nefarious and some things are just byproducts of a bad system with unintended consequences that end up happening. And it looks nefarious, but when you really get into it, you realize that, no, it's kind of not, but.
Well, in making the con, what we discovered is that quite often it's a mixture of the two. I mean, right? I mean, you have like an inherently bad system, in the con, we're talking about the financial system, by and large, or the mortgage finance system, whatever kind of system or subsystem you want to talk about. And when you have a bad system, you have smart people that are out there that know how to take advantage of it. And so I think that it is actually a healthy mixture of just happenstance and opportunists who become mean but merciless. And so I think that it's a combination of both things. I mean, something's just sort of happened and there's, whatever, like you said, product of a bad system. But if there's a bad system, there's people who know how to game it. Mm-hmm. They'll game it every single time. And they're the ones, if they're not stopped, if they're not prosecuted, if they're not, thrown in jail, that they're going to keep on doing it. And that's ultimately that's exactly the story that we tell in the con. It's like our very first episode. We show how in tiny Summit County, Ohio, there's a group of cops who basically had no background in mortgages, no background in finance, no background in any of these things, who were able to see that a crime was going on, right? So they investigated it. Then they prosecuted it, and then they got indictments, and then they got, then Big Will went to jail, right? And that's the way it's supposed to happen.
Right.
Right? I mean, that's exactly what didn't happen on a national scale, and that's what basically the rest of the series talks about, is that episode 1 says, crimes were happening, and these people found a way to prosecute it. They did the right thing, and the bad guys went to jail. Episodes 2 through 4 show how that did not happen at all on a national scale and to devastating consequences. But all we have to do is look back to little Summit County, Ohio, and say, oh, it could be done. You don't have to be, a financial whiz kid from Harvard in order to figure out that a scam's a scam. Just do the damn work. I mean, if there's a crime going on, investigate, for fuck's sake. I mean,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, what more could you say to that? Yeah, that was great, man. Those guys, none of them were forensic financial people, and they were able to piece it all together and figure it out. And like even guys that you would think that like if you were to look, oh yeah, they'd probably be prejudiced to a certain extent. I mean, they even said it. They were like, no, they went after the poorest and the brownest and the meek, the weak, and the ignorant. Right.
Well, that's such. I'm glad you brought that up, Sean, because that's exactly that's one of the biggest points that after this year and everything that's happened since George Floyd. I mean, what the Summit County Task Force did in Akron, Ohio, is exactly what it looks like when Black Lives Matter to people, right?
Yeah.
They go and they see that crimes are happening in these neighborhoods. They prosecute those crimes, and the people who are taking advantage of vulnerable populations are thrown in jail, right? They're not allowed to continually victimize these neighborhoods, and and poor elderly African American women like Addie, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's exactly what Black Lives Mattering looks like, right? Well before it gets to a point where there's a conflict on the street between two people. That conflict on the street never has to happen if the law is being equally applied across all neighborhoods, right?
Yeah.
If you can't get away with something in one neighborhood, you shouldn't be able to get away with it in another.
Yeah.
And that's yet another one of the big lessons from the financial crisis, right? I mean, this was a crisis in poor Black and brown neighborhoods in the 90s. It was a crisis in the early 2000s. But it didn't become a crisis to this country until it hit suburban white neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. Then all of a sudden it became a crisis, but at that point it was too late.
Yeah.
When that happened, then when you finally address something when it's too late, that's when you get a financial collapse.
That was a great point that you just made about Black Lives. Really, I mean, that is the essence of what Black Lives really matters means, and I don't know, I don't want to get into what it is now, but I mean, it's just crazy how things get hijacked for agendas. You know what I mean? It's, and whole, I don't know, cultures of people just are used as pawns and just, I don't know. It's just to think about it. Sometimes it's so just disappointing. It's really disappointing when you think that the world is one way, and then you wake up and realize that it's something completely different, that you have no idea. Like, you didn't even know that, like, how am I even a part of this? Like, how'd this happen? So anyways, we could talk about this forever in a day and keep going. But so do you guys got any other, projects in the pipeline? As far as documentaries go, or anything that you can talk about? It's okay if you can't.
Well, we're hoping right now. It's like we have like a good 65-70% of the season 2 of the con. That is ready to go if we can muster enough support for season 1, and so that's kind of the big thing that we have, and we have some real blockbuster stuff that can come out, in that season 2. I mean, season 1, it gets us to modern day in some respects, but season 2 would really connect everything from the Financial Crisis Inquiry Commission and everything that didn't happen off the heels of that to right now and the post-COVID economy. Because a lot of people think that the economy that we're in right now is because of COVID. The economy was failing months before COVID was even heard about, right? And that's what people don't understand, is that all COVID did was paper over the cracks that were already showing. And so it became like the easy thing where it's like people said, oh, it's all because of COVID. Well, COVID certainly had an effect on service economy and so many other things. But as far as like, the pillars of the economy and how things were happening, in high finance and what have you, it was already falling apart.
Yeah.
And so season 2 will really discuss everything going right up to, right now.
Yeah.
And show exactly how everything that fed into the great financial crisis in 2008, what it means to say that it was never addressed, and also how so many decisions have made it far worse. And that, and by the time we're done, I think, if you're a careful viewer of season 2, if we're so lucky as to be able to get it out there, I think that there's a chance that you'll have a very clear understanding as to exactly why we're in the world that we're in right now. Yeah.
That's great. I can't wait. I hope it does. And I hope I can continue helping you, try to push this season 1 out and, get some more traction on it. And like I said, we're going to talk in a minute when we get off of this. How about you, Cindy? Anything that you're working on? Any projects, that you got coming out or?
Yeah, actually, Eric and I work a lot together outside of the con. We have a dark comedy about the worst Christmas ever. So it happens to be releasing in the worst year ever for a lot of people. So it's a funny little dark teen comedy, body comedy that we worked on for the last couple years. And it's getting released November 3rd. On every major platform, VOD and cable VOD, DVD, and right now you can pre-order it on iTunes. It's called Worst Christmas Ever.
Awesome.
And yeah.
I was talking to somebody the other day, and the movie theater around where I live, they're renting out theaters for $100.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm like, but nothing new's come out. Like, so, I mean, what are we going to watch? Are you going to watch something that's old or rerun but I mean, that's just how where we're at with movies right now. And
yeah, the newer the movie, the more that fee gets higher. But if you want to do a 50-person viewing, for an older movie, it's like about $99. But why would you want to get 50 people together in a room right now?
Yeah, right. Oh, that's great. That's a good point.
I can think of.
I mean, you can. But
yeah, you'd be pushing your luck, though. Who knows?
Yeah.
All right. Well, everything that you guys just said, and any of your social media and stuff like that that you want found will be in the show notes. I have your bios and everything else, so I think I can probably piece everything else together, and I'll get this one out pretty quick. My queue right now is about 50 episodes, but when I have stuff that's kind of more timely and kind of where we're at, I bump it to the front, and so yours will be probably coming out in the next. I want to try and get it out before the election. But that's maybe pushing it because that's right around the corner. So yeah, I appreciate you guys stopping by and spending some time with me and enlightening me on your projects and a little bit more about the con and my listeners and everything else and the audience. If there's anything else that you guys want to talk about or say before we close it out.
I would just say thank you for your support and all your listeners and viewers. Just look out for our projects. We're probably the minority voice in Hollywood, so we're not afraid to push the barriers. And I'm so happy to have found Eric in Ohio. We kind of moved here about the same time, so it's good to find each other.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, same for me. I guess the only note that I probably want to add is that one thing I didn't mention was that one of the things that we tried really hard to do with the con was to illustrate the fact that there were literally thousands of people who were trying every way they could to stop this from happening, to stop the financial crisis from happening, and to make sure that the rule of law actually meant something in the financial sector, and that when politicians are helping and not hurting, that there's actually an opportunity for government to help make systems work. It's when politicians get in the way, and it's always the political appointees that end up ruining everything. Or it's the lobbying groups who put in, nonsensical, regulation as opposed to really smart regulation, that kind of thing. But the main thing is that as dark as the con can be, if you look close enough, there's an awful lot to be optimistic about. The fact that there are so many people out there who are good people who are trying everything they can to protect us and to protect our economy from falling, from collapsing and falling into the hands of the wrong people. And they need our support. They need our support with who we vote for or how we vote, and it's not just president, right? It's like, it's like it might be a devil's choice for a lot of people right now, including myself. But it's the down ticket stuff, man. It's like, who are these judges, especially the judges, the judiciary? It's like, you know, who are the council members? Who are like all these people? You know, those are where things happen close to home. And if we can help the people who are trying to do their level best to help, you know, make things work the way they're supposed to, they will. We just have to be smarter about who we support, or make sure that we have that we get people out there that we can support who will actually do those things. And that's the difficult part. That takes work, but that's on us. We need to do that.
Well, I mean, the women's suffrage movement, that lasted 70 years before they actually got their rights and everything else. The women that actually started it didn't even get to see it to fruition, right? But that's why it got to where it did, is because you had people that were relentlessly fighting for the rights of women and what was right. And they never gave up. And we have to do the same thing, but the game has changed a little bit. You know, we've got technology now that, you know, that can be weaponized against us. But if it can be weaponized against us, then we have to realize that we can weaponize it against them as well. So it's just a matter of organizing and trying to come together for a shared purpose, I believe. True.
Like we say at the very end of the con, this will end when we've all collectively finally say enough.
Yep. That's a great point to end it on right there, Eric. I appreciate you guys. Thank you for all that you've done and all that you're doing and continue to do. I look forward to everything that you guys got coming out. You have a fan in me for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for being out there all the time, you know, putting out these podcasts. They're important.
No, you're welcome, man. And hang out. I'll talk to you in just a second.
Thanks, Sean.
You've been listening to the Nowhere to Go But Up podcast. Sean is a single dad, a union blue-collar guy, and he spent time in federal and state prison for drug trafficking and fraud. When he was released from prison in 2006, all he had was the clothes on his back, a bag of mail, and some paperwork. Since then, he's turned his life around and shares the struggles and successes on this podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we hope you were moved. To connect to the show, book a guest spot. For merch, Patreon, PayPal, and social media links, go to linktr.ee/nowhere to go but up. On Instagram at Nowhere to Go But Up Now. On Twitter at But Up Now. On the YouTube channel at Nowhere to Go But Up Podcast. See you next time.